Over the last 6 years of building systems and working as a software engineer for startups to billion-dollar companies, I've come across a lot of automations and more recently AI automations. And here's the God's honest truth that anyone would hate to admit. Most of these systems fail. Not necessarily because the technology was bad or the people building them were incompetent, but mostly because they skip one crucial step before building them. They never diagnose the business first. Recently, a founder running a done with you info business came to me. Solid business, amazing team. He had been quoted $20,000 for an AI implementation. Dashboards, integrations, all the jazz. And honestly, the solution was very technically sound. There were no issues with it. The only problem was it was solving problems that he didn't have. So I decided to spend 45 minutes with him mapping out the entire process and realized that his systems were already best in class for his stage. Task management, fulfillment, lead engagement, everything was very dialed in. What was really costing him money were two simple bottlenecks. The cost of fixing those, you might ask, under $3,000. Now, one thing I'd like to highlight is that wasn't a story of bad consultants or over-enthusiastic founders. That was just a story of what happens if you skip the diagnosis and just try to jump on the AI train. So, if you are someone running an info business right now and you're trying to figure out where AI actually fits, this is the framework. The same one I use with every founder before any automation gets built. And I'm gonna share it with you. All right, step one is mapping the customer journey from start to finish. Now, every info business runs on the same 5 pillars. Lead generation, how do people find you? Sales, how do they buy? Onboarding, what happens right after they pay? Fulfillment, i.e. how do you deliver? And retention, how do you make them keep coming back? Now, here's what I actually care about. Where are humans manually performing repetitive tasks? Again, to be very clear, I'm not talking about who's responsible for what department. I'm talking about where a human being manually does something that happens the same way every single time with little to no decision making. I have every founder walk me through each stage on the call, and I'm not looking for the ideal version. I want the messy, real version. What actually happens when a lead comes in at 11 p.m. and your sales guy is asleep? What happens to onboarding when your ops person takes a sick day? Those edge cases are where your systems actually break. Here's a pro tip if you're a founder. The 5 stages that I mentioned, rate them from 1 to 10, then ask your team to rate them. I have never once in my life seen those 2 numbers match, and it's very interesting to see, and it'll be interesting for you as an exercise. But that gap between what you think is happening and what's actually happening, that's where the money is hiding. For my client in particular, this revealed something interesting. As I mentioned, his fulfillment and task management were genuinely strong. Most founders at this stage aren't even close. So a full operational rebuild would have been a waste of money. Again, dashboards, integrations, chatbots, all of that stuff sounds extremely cool, but that $20,000 bill that you're about to pay for them should make sense in the long run. His problems were concentrated in 2 specific areas, and we were only able to find that out because of the process map we did. So if you've completed step 1 and mapped your customer journey, step 2 is to calculate the revenue per employee. It's simple math that most founders have never done, but it changes how you look at your entire operation. And the reason this is important is because revenue per employee minus cost per employee gives you a broad picture of your ROI per employee. For info businesses which operate at near zero marginal cost, you can Google benchmarks as they vary depending on what stage you are. But a super quick rough check is that each employee should be making 4 times of what you paid them. Now, to describe this rule of thumb with an example, if you're paying someone $80,000, they should be making you above $300,000 during that year. If they're not, then I'm going to be honest with you, it's either a hiring problem or an automation opportunity. Knowing which one, that's the game. To add further context from the point of view of someone who's worked at a company that does $200K a year to over $1 billion a year, the companies that reach crazy numbers or over $1 million a year, they don't have fancier technology than everyone else. They just figured out which tasks needed humans and which ones didn't. So when I ran this for my client, the manual work he was doing, digging through call transcripts, prepping for meetings, giving his sales team feedback, tracking his sales team across different tools, that was eating the equivalent of a full-time hire's hours. And the leads that slipped through because this information wasn't easily accessible, that had already cost him $15,000 in January 2026. Now, that's not a nice to have AI situation. That is a $15,000 hole that has a very easy fix. Moving on to step 3, which I like to call the automation filter. And if I'm being honest, this is where the framework earns its money. You've mapped the journey, you've found the inefficiencies, and the temptation is to automate everything. Don't. Not every efficiency is worth automating. Here's the filter I run. 3 simple questions. Number 1, frequency. How often does this task happen? Once a month? The build cost probably isn't justified. 20 times a week? Now we're talking. Second, what is this task actually costing you? Be specific, not it takes a while. How many hours per week multiplied by the hourly cost of whoever's doing it, put a real number on it. And finally, it comes down to the complexity. Is this a straightforward data transfer, information moving from A to B the same way every time, or does it require genuine human judgment? Because here's something that doesn't get said enough. Some tasks genuinely still need a human, believe it or not, still. AI is incredible at moving data, pattern recognition, and repetitive decisions. It is not great at nuance, relationships, or creativity yet. Again, keyword being yet. And again, exactly as I mentioned before, this is what happened to my client. He'd been quoted for a full integration across everything: YouTube analytics, project management, CRM, community platform, multiple dashboards layered on top of each other, and on paper, honestly, it all made sense. But when I ran this filter, his existing tools already handled most of that. His Notion workspace was already the central hub for his data. Adding another interface on top would have been redundant. Not wrong, just unnecessary because his team is already used to using Notion. To give a quick rundown of the two systems that were built that I've been mentioning for a while, you can skip this part if you're not interested. But first were his call transcripts. He was using Fathom to record every single sales and client call, but then manually digging through the recordings to prep for follow-ups or figure out what happened with a specific client. Now these transcripts are golden data that most founders are sleeping on. So we built an automation that takes every Fathom transcript and pushes it straight into Notion. Speaker labels, call date, call type, all link back to the original recording, all automatic. His team never gets involved. And now they're in the central hub of his team, which is Notion. On top of that, he needed a way to actually query all this information. Not another dashboard to check, a way to ask what's the deal with client X or what objections keep coming up in the sales call. Now to achieve this, we connected Claude with direct read access to his Notion workspace, his task manager, his transcripts, his client database. And what that means is he can interrogate his own business data conversationally and start tweaking his content messaging to handle objections and questions that come up before a lead even jumps on the call. That was it. 2 automations, high frequency, high cost impact, low complexity. Everything else didn't pass the filter. FYI, if you're already thinking you want someone to run this on your business, there's a link in the description doing free discovery audits for the next 10 people. But let me finish the framework first because the last step is the one most people skip. So last step before you build anything, do the math, and that is a non-negotiable. Take the cost of the problem, say it's 15 hours a week of manual work at $50 an hour. That's $750 a week, roughly $39,000 a year. Now compare that to the build cost. If the automation is $3,000, your payback period is about 4 weeks. After that, pure savings every single week. In the example I shared above of my client, the projected ROI was 18 times in year 1, and that was on a conservative estimate. I can say this with absolute certainty that the actual numbers will be much better. But here's the principle. If the math doesn't work, do not build it. And I know I keep repeating myself, but that's just because how passionately I feel about this. And I don't care if it sounds like I'm beating a dead horse, but doesn't matter how impressive the technology is, doesn't matter how good the demo looks. Numbers first, always. I've personally told founders, don't automate this more times than I've said yes. And this might sound like bad business, like why would he do this? But honestly, it's the complete opposite. Because when I do say build this, they know that I'm coming from a place of truth and that the math is real. So if you're a founder, here's what you can do today. If this visual process map sounds too meaty, literally right now after this video, open a simple Google spreadsheet or a Notion doc or whatever you use and write out those 5 stages, which is lead gen, sales, onboarding, fulfillment, retention. And under each one, list every single step that actually happens. Not what should happen, what actually happens. Then label each step with one of 2 tags, which is human decision required or data transfer. Now, the data transfer step might not necessarily mean that it is a data transfer step, but it's just how I like to differentiate between the 2 things. Because every step tagged data transfer is a potential automation opportunity. And every step tagged human decision is probably not, at least not yet. However, if you think you're not the right person to make those calls, either get your team involved or again, some expert. That list alone will tell you where the real money is hiding in your operations. And more importantly, when you eventually talk to anyone about AI, you'll be evaluating their recommendations from a position of clarity instead of guessing. Now, if you watched all the way through and you're thinking, damn, I would love if someone runs this for my business, we are doing 10 free discovery audits, which are 45-minute long calls in which we run through your operations and point out what's worth automating. If the answer to that question is nothing right now, then we'll tell you. Links in the description, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.